Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back to see session 2 of Is Today's Pop Music Fake or Real? We ended the last session with a little bit of music theory so you could understand the scholarship that I'll be presenting in a little bit. And so now let's proceed a little bit more. Okay, once I get this screen to work. Here we go. Okay. It turns out if you look at pop songs today and categorize what chords are used in modern pop songs, what you discovered of all the various chords of what's known as a harmonized scale that I showed you before, C, D minor, E minor, F, G, and so forth, okay, that only the chords number 1, number 4, number 5 are largely used. You look at the percent, if you take all the songs and add up all the chords and do all the statistics, you find that most popular songs have only 3 chords. And these are the most common 3 chords that are used in popular music and spiritual music. And these are known as the 1-4-5 combination. And so anybody who does music, you'll hear people talking about 1-4-5. You wonder, what's 145? Well, it's in the key of C, it'd be C. Okay, and then it'd be F. And then there'd be G, or what's known as G7. Those are the 3 chords. And there's thousands and thousands of songs that have been written with those 3 chords. So in order to, again, give you a little more background on the color of music and the flavor of music, I'm going to do a little bit more playing. This is not a concert, you know. So everyone knows the song Amazing Grace. There's a movie written about it. Judy Collins, who is on the left-hand side, did a wonderful recording, very famous pop tune on Amazing Grace. And it was a song that was composed by a slave trader, John Newton, which is a fact that not many people know. So originally, this song had those 3 chords, 1-4-5. It's in Roman numerals in this case. And so I'll play this way so you can hear it, all right? That's the G, C. Here comes the F, C again. It's a beautiful song. It's not a folk song, spiritual song, and it was a pop song because Judy Collins made it into a pop song. Okay, now what I'm going to do is play it 4 ways. Now, I'm also a Chinese chef, and I wrote a cookbook on Chinese cooking, and that's another story. And so and there's a famous way of Peking duck made 4 ways. So I'm going to play this song 4 ways. You just heard it the first way, which is the most common way and the one that it was composed in. And then I'm going to play it in the blues fashion with that blues note, because this also is recorded as a blues. And then I'm going to add some color to it, adding those minor chords in it so you can see how it sounds. And because I like playing jazz, I'm going to add what are known as embellishments, which I won't go into the theory, but which are more complicated sounds, a little bit atonal. And you'll see how the same song can be modified different ways. Why am I going through all this? Because when we get into the history of pop music, all this stuff comes into play. Okay, so here we go very quickly here. Okay, that's the traditional way. That note there. That's the bluesy version. color. Little minor. Okay, so you can, there are a few mistakes in that, but you can get the richness of it. And a lot of popular music back in the 40s and 50s had that kind of stuff. And then there was a period where jazz was popular music, so. Again, not very polished, but you get the sense of the jazziness of it. All right. So we won't go to the next break. We'll continue on. Okay. The evolution of pop is a story about technology. Put my guitar down. It's a story about technology. Popular music in America really began between the 1800s and 1950s. And many of you may have heard of Tin Pan Alley in New York City, between 5th and 6th Avenues. And here was the manufacturing of American pop music. It was called Tin Pan Alley because in all these storefronts behind which people were composing songs that would be then made into sheet music that would be distributed and sold so people would play it on their pianos. There was some show tunes going on that people could hear it. And they called it Tin Pan Alley because the cacophony of all the pianos playing these new pieces sounded like people banging on tin pans. And that's why it was called Tin Pan Alley. And so this is where American pop music really began, in the sense where you want to make money off of this music. And so lots of very famous people came out of Tin Pan Alley, composers. And then in the late 1800s, the first bit of technology evolved, and that was the phonograph. Emil Berliner invented it, and Thomas Edison refined it. And this really changed the whole game because now people could listen to pop music that they hear and not just play it on the piano at home. And so it really caused a revolution in the industry where people could listen to music at their home. And so the pop music really exploded at that time. And that time, a lot of the greats who created pop music, names you, I'm sure people listening to this may know. For example, Harold Arlen, who wrote Over the Rainbow, Wizard of Oz, Irving Berlin, White Christmas. I'm recording this around Christmas time. There you go, White Christmas. Sammy Cahn, George M. Cohen, George Gershwin, one of my favorites, Oscar Hammerstein of all the great musicals on Broadway, Lawrence Hart musicals, Scott Joplin, famous musician, was part of the group, Jerome Kern, Johnny Mercer, Fats Waller, Cole Porter, Richard Rodgers, it goes on. And they created the great American songbook of popular songs that people would buy records of and then listen to in various clubs. And a lot of this music was basically very bluesy and jazzy and very sophisticated music in a sense of composition. And to play it, you really had to know some music. You just couldn't pick it up. You had to know all those chord progressions I told you and then some on top of it. And of course, these were the composers, and the performers are icons. Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Fred Astaire, and Billie Holiday, Frank Sinatra, and so on. The Great American Songbook, unfortunately, is become a bit passé in modern popular music. The great practitioner of it was Frank Sinatra, who actually published a book, The Great American Songbook, And on his deathbed or close to it, he gave it over to Tony Bennett, who was a great performer and still performing in his 90s. We don't quite know who will get the mantle to perform the American Songbook once Tony Bennett dies. So this was a major piece of American pop music. So to give you an idea of what it sounds like, I'm going to play a very short clip of the great Ella Fitzgerald, so you can get a sense of what the sound of the music was. And this music usually had a large verse, and the hook kind of came on later. So let's see if you can hear this, maybe see it. Just a short clip. You hear the background, Nelson Riddle Orchestra. It's very lush. This is sort of like a pre-verse.
Now you say you're lonely. You cry the long night through.
Extended notes.
Well, you can cry me a river.
A lot of feeling. A lot of feeling.
I cried a river.
The accompaniment is fairly sophisticated. Drums, violins. Okay. Bye, Ella. Okay, now, what happened here? I can't find myself. Here I am. Okay, just a moment. Sorry. All right, now, so that was Ella. And that was kind of typical of what the music was. And then another technology came in, electrical broadcasting through the radio. And the radio provided another means by which people could listen to this incredible American songbook, this incredible music. And radio was the golden age of radio between 1920 and 1950s. And you can see here, this is the year on the vertical axis to the left, and the radio sales in millions of dollars, 800 millions of dollars. The year's actually in the bottom there. Just a huge amount of revenue. So the golden age of radio pretty much killed the end of killed the sheet music industry, and so the whole pop music scene changed. And then around 1930s, the same time came the rise of jazz and blues. And although, as I just said, during that time, the American Songbook had jazz and blues, but it began in the 1930s, and the blues was sort of a parallel track. And they came out of the Mississippi Delta and the country, and the blues was the heart of jazz. When I learned jazz, I was told I had to learn blues before jazz. And this was coupled to the electric guitar. And was invented by a guy named Adolf Rickenbacker in 1931. And then in the 1940s, more technology came on. You had tape technology. Many of you may remember the 4-track tape and the 8-track tapes in the 40s through the 60s. And so you could record a piece and then record over the recording multiple times. So a single individual could actually produce an entire record without anybody else if they were talented in multiple instruments and could sing. In the 1950s, rock and roll came on the scene with Elvis Presley on the left and television. And that linkage changed popular music forever. So what is the blues and what is rock and roll? Well, everyone knows it, but I just have to give a little bit of a clip here of the great B.B. King, who just died, who epitomizes what the blues sound is.
You stopped by Purcell's for some paint swatches and a little advice. Came back for some professional quality PVC paint.
Okay. And just listen for a minute to this electric guitar of B.B. King. And I'll just move it forward a little bit. You could just bending those notes, single notes.
You know, I doubt if you can feel it like I do.
Great feeling,
But when I think about the things
and B.B. King, listen to that voice. It's feeling. It's a tremendous amount of feeling in the jazz and in the blues. And we're going to talk about how that may have changed with the more modern music that we have now. Okay, so that was an example of it. Of course, this isn't a history of rock music. People would say, well, why don't you show this? Why don't you show that? All right, then came the time of a unique kind of music coming out of the Brill Building in New York. The Brill Building was a place where a unique kind of soul music was evolving. And to give you an example of this, because we will all be referring to this a little bit later, is Little Eva. Hear that sound? A little bit different.
everybody's doing a brand new dance now.
Baby, do the locomotion.
I know you get to like it. It's
Simpler music. It's simpler music. Simple chords. Rock sound. And so that's the Brill sound, which was extremely popular in popular music. And I think maybe you can get a sense now that the complexity of music is a bit going down. I'm not saying it's bad music. I'm just saying that a little less out of the heart and a little more up front. Okay? And it's a blend of the Latin music, black gospel, rhythm, and blues. That was the famous Brill sound. And rock and roll really changed. In rock and roll, we're talking about popular music, mostly in that genre. I'm not going into the country, although toward the end I'll get into country, those who like country. Clearly, most people say the seminal movement, the seminal event in popular music that changed it to the way it is today was when the Beatles came on Ed Sullivan. I remember that as a kid. And then, of course, at the same time, we had the folk music renaissance with the Nobel Prize winner here, Bob Dylan. Okay. This was followed now by a lot of avant-garde popular music. Okay, one could argue that Bob Dylan and the Beatles had magnificent lyrics. The Beatles' music at Berklee School of Music is taught in the jazz program as what students should learn to play by memory and by ear, because it was so sophisticated. If they can play Beatles, they could play anything. And that's the God's honest truth. But then, every generation of kids wants to do something different, and generally that their parents don't like. So then you came into a whole series of different rock styles, one called punk rock, which was minimalist, very simple, angry, but which had catchy tunes. So I'm going to play a piece here by the Sex Pistols. So you can get a sense for what this is. This is actually a very famous piece by the Sex Pistols. And so you can listen to this, and then we're going to take a short break.
Are you ready?
Once we get
Garmadon, heroes aren't born. They're
angry. Rage. Okay, that's what a lot of people think rock and roll is. Really heavy metal, a lot of noise, some would say, and very simple chords and really in your face.